Hi, this is Randal Schwartz, host of FLOSS Weekly. This week, Dan Lynch joins me. We're going to talk about the twisted event-driven framework for Python. That's coming up next, so stay tuned.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
Bandwidth for FLOSS Weekly is provided by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is FLOSS Weekly with Randal Schwartz and Dan Lynch. Episode 225, recorded September 5th, 2012. Twisted. It's time for FLOSS Weekly, the show about free, libre, open source software. I am your host, Randal Schwartz, Merlin at StoneHenge.com, bringing you each week the movers, the shakers, the big projects, the small projects, projects you might not have heard of, projects you may be using every day and not even aware of it. So we have a great variety of guests on this show. I really enjoy doing this show because of all the great people I get to talk to. This week is no exception to that, but we'll get to that in just a second. Instead, let me go ahead and bring on my co-host. You may remember him from last week. It's Dan Lynch. Dan, welcome back to the show.
Hello. I'd just like to say I have been home. I haven't been here all week just waiting for this. Don't hang around waiting for the call. But no, it's great to be back. It's always great to talk to you guys.
Yes, and for those of you watching the video, you may actually see something you haven't seen probably in 6 months, I don't think. My big blue Yeti. In fact, I'm recording this from my closest thing I have to a home in Beaverton, Oregon. I'm here this week actually taking a slight time off after having been at DragonCon last weekend, which is always very draining. So I thought, well, I should just take a few days off and kick back and not do too much, although greatly I have to work for Captain Neil later today and all the rest of the weekend to get his website up and running and make it go faster. But anyway, so if you're looking at seeing slightly different surroundings, that is in fact why I am here with my big blue Yeti. We have a great guest this week, a really interesting project and a really interesting guest. I believe so anyway. We'll have to find out after we start talking to her. Her name is Jessica McKellar, if I hope I pronounced that right. Sounds actually, as an American name, or mostly American name, that's probably the easiest one for me to pronounce of all the ones we're doing for months from now. But she's here to talk to us about Twisted, which is a framework for Python that allows multiple events to be handled in a dynamic way. So we're going to talk a little bit about, I believe, about the nature of event-driven programming, which is that instead of having like a subroutine call another subroutine, call another subroutine, you basically say, here is what you want to have happen when, say, a web page comes in or a web request comes in, or when maybe like an IRC message comes in. So event-driven program, I've done some of that myself, so I should be pretty much up on how this all works. But Jessica's going to come in and talk to us about Twisted. Dan, what do you know about Twisted?
Not a massive amount. I've used it a little bit, but only for demos and stuff. But I know it's really, really big in the event-driven kind of programming space, particularly for Python, obviously. So I can't wait to hear more about it, and also some of the other stuff that Jessica's involved with, like the Python Software Foundation, Open Hatch, and so on. So there's lots of stuff we can talk to her about.
And I have to say, I'm probably going to have to bite my tongue a little bit here because we're going to be talking a lot about Python today. And, you know, Python's not my favorite programming language. Perl certainly is. So it'll be interesting seeing how Python has actually helped and contributed to this project and where it's going in the future. So cool. Anything else before we get started?
No, let's get into it.
Absolutely. It sounds like a cue. Let's go ahead and bring on our guest. Jessica, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Cool, cool. And where are you speaking to us from?
I'm in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Very cool. I've been there a couple times. I've been in Boston many times, and that's nearby anyway. Actually, the home of Click and Clack. That's always kind of cool, too. So
yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Very cool, very cool. So I gave a sort of a halfway decent attempt, I think, at introducing Twisted at the beginning of the show. But why don't we start with you, since you know more about this than I do. Give us the 30,000-foot view of Twisted and how it came into existence.
Sure. So Twisted is an event-driven networking engine written in Python. It provides really nice high-level APIs for writing clients and servers for pretty much all of the popular networking protocols. So if you want to write a TCP client or server, or UDP, SSL, HTTP, IMAP, IRC, all of those things, Twisted makes it really easy to write robust clients and servers and provides the ability to run them off the shelf as well. It also makes it really easy to test your event-driven clients and servers, and it has a nice sort of deployment mechanism for a uniform application deployment interface for spinning up your applications.
So
that's
the main
the 30,000.
Okay, yeah. The main problem we're trying to solve is that we have to communicate, and in communications, things come in asynchronously, which is that something will come in from maybe if you're simultaneously doing, say, a web client and an IRC server, there might be an IRC message that pops in, there might be something that hits on the web, and almost simultaneously. So, how does Twisted help solve this?
Sure. So that sounds sort of like a question about how event-driven programming looks in general. Is that right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, okay. So in a sort of a classic event-driven model, you have some sort of event loop. And when you have an application that's going to do work, and sometimes you have work that is expensive, instead of blocking while waiting for that expensive work to complete, you can register callbacks with this event loop, and it'll let you know when an event is ready to be processed. So Twisted provides a nice abstraction on top of that sort of event loop idea. It has this notion of a reactor that knows how to manage all types of events. And perhaps even more importantly, Twisted provides a uniform interface on top of the underlying operating system APIs for doing this sort of event-driven polling work. So, Linux has poll and epoll and select, and, Windows has IO completion ports, and, FreeBSD has KQ. So there are a bunch of polling mechanisms that the operating system exposes. And the operating system is doing the hard work of, sort of listening for events and multiplexing and demultiplexing them. But Twisted provides a really nice abstraction on top of that. That's a nice cross-platform way of getting work done efficiently.
Okay, so if I were to, as I'm using Twisted, then I need to first figure out what sort of events I want to react to, and then I need to tell Twisted, okay, when an IRC message or when a web hit comes in, you said callback. So that's like I have a subroutine that's going to get enabled when that comes in, right?
Yeah, so when a particular type of event has happened, I know I'm supposed to invoke this callback that knows how to handle it.
Okay. Now, this is different from traditional programming where we have a strategy of, a flow of control, and this subroutine calls that subroutine, which calls that subroutine. How different is that to program something that's event-driven?
Yeah, the answer is it's kind of pretty different, and it's often not something that you experience in school. So the first time that you are dealing with callbacks and this sort of non-linear flow, it can be interesting to wrap your head around. But so you would contrast perhaps an event-driven program with either a single-threaded synchronous program or perhaps a multi-threaded program. So a multi-threaded program deals with the fact that you sometimes have to block on expensive queries or expensive resources by separating out those tasks, blocking tasks, into multiple threads of control that your operating system manages. Which is great in many circumstances. It introduces some complexity. So multi-threaded programs can be more time efficient, but it introduces the complexity of having to manage these threads and manage access to shared resources. Like getting your locking not quite right is a notorious way of having like subtle multi-threaded programming bugs. So multi-threading is one way to solve blocking on expensive operations. Another model is this event-driven programming model, where you have a single thread of control typically, but then instead of blocking on tasks, you register callbacks for those events. And then continue through your execution. So it's a pretty different model from a multi-threaded paradigm that I think people are more used to. Although with things like Node.js, this event-driven programming is sort of in vogue right now.
So Jessica, where did Twisted come from? Can you tell us a little bit about the history of it? Because I'd be interested to know what kind of problems they were trying to solve, like how old it is and stuff like that.
Yeah, I like this story a lot. In 2000, Glyph, the creator of Twisted, was working on a text-based multiplayer game called Twisted Reality, so like a networked multiplayer game. And so it's 2000, and he's written this in Java as a multi-threaded application. And it's like a big mess of threads. There are many threads per connection doing the input and the output and the logic. And like the threading was never quite right. Like the locking was never quite right. He was getting deadlocks. It wasn't scaling very well. Data was getting corrupted. And he was just getting very frustrated with this multi-threaded Java app that he was trying to write. So he was sort of fishing around for alternatives. And while he was doing that, he discovered Python. And in particular, he discovered sort of Python's wrapper around the select module for, sort of the select API that your operating system exposes. And he was really interested in this. And you have to remember that back in 2000, there was no Java non-blocking I/O package. Like Java.nio didn't exist yet. It occurred in 2002, I think. So he discovers Python. He discovers this notion of handling events through select instead of having a multi-threaded program. He rewrites this application in Python using select, using event-driven programming, and he's sort of immediately hooked. Like, he feels like it's much less complex, it's less buggy, it's scaling better. The idea of fun as an event-driven program instead. And now he's so excited. He's like, well, I have my server. Now I kind of want a client. Maybe I want mail in my game. Maybe I want to. And so all of a sudden, he event-driven clients and servers for a bunch of different networking protocols. And he's like, okay, the game, Twisted Reality, that's a good idea. But I'm kind of excited about this bigger idea as well. This idea of providing this really sort of robust cross-platform library for doing event-driven network programming in Python. So it's morphed into Twisted, the project. Twisted Reality never totally came to fruition, although it is sort of a lot of jokes. Many people do write games, network games, in Twisted. So Twisted Reality morphed into this sort of broader project, and that is the genesis story for Twisted. Twisted, we celebrated our 10th anniversary. Still going strong.
Excellent. So, what kind of projects are using Twisted, and where would we see it? Well, not see it exactly because it's kind of in the background. But you know what I mean? What kind of projects would we have heard of that are making use of Twisted right now, and how did they use it?
Yeah, Twisted is used in a. Sorry, can you still hear me? Yeah, yep. Maybe. Great. So Twisted is used in a bunch of both commercial and open source applications. Commercially, Google uses it, Lucasfilm, places like Justin TV. And this is usually for, server infrastructure, in particular if you have to do a lot of work across multiple protocols. Twisted makes this easy. And then on the open source end, also Launchpad. So if you use, Ubuntu, well, Canonical's, Launchpad software collaboration platform that uses Twisted. On the open source end, Twisted is the core of a lot of other servers, including BuildBot, if you use BuildBot for continuous integration, BitTorrent, Tahoe LAFS, the least authority file system. These all use Twisted servers as part of their backend.
Oh, excellent. So it's very widely used. And you were mentioning before you had your 10th anniversary, so it's quite well established now, quite a mature product as well. Yeah,
it's a little bit of a dinosaur. It's become sort of a breeding ground for ideas that eventually make their way maybe into Python or maybe other event-driven libraries. And we've built up a good reputation for being, a really stable, low regression library. We have a very strict backwards compatibility policy, so it's a very reliable library.
And you mentioned other event-driven frameworks that people may have heard of. So how would you compare Twisted to other things that people may know, like Tornado, for example, or some of the others that are out there?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because Twisted has a somewhat different scope from pretty much every other library. So Tornado is a non-blocking web server that came out of Facebook. And so its mandate is somewhat narrower. So Tornado makes it easy to spin up event-driven web servers in Python. And Twisted makes it easy to write non-blocking web servers, but also, web clients and IRC clients and servers, and it has, these application deployment mechanisms. So the mandates are a little bit different. Another example is gEvent. gEvent is a coroutine-based Python networking library. And this is pretty different. So you have an underlying event loop. It uses libevent for an event loop. But what it does is it exposes a synchronous API on top of this event-driven model. So it provides a synchronous API to, like TCP and SSL connections. So that's really interesting, but a pretty different approach from Twisted. Fundamentally, having sort of competition in this space is great. Python has a ton of web server implementations and like a lot of networking libraries, but this is great because it forces us all to try to be better, to have crisper mission and better documentation and better examples, and to be performant with each other. So we appreciate that it's a rich space that we're working in. But Twisted has a somewhat broader mandate, I would say, than other libraries.
Okay, excellent. And I have to ask the obligatory questions about Python 3 that every Python person will want to know. So how's the Python 3 support for Twisted, and what's the plans around that?
Yeah, it's a work in progress. We actually had a Google Summer of Code student working on part of Python 3 migration. It's a pretty tricky, so Twisted is a pretty large code base, and it involves a lot of code that is sort of the hardest thing to port, which is a lot of like binary or byte stream data and like a lot of string / maybe Unicode / maybe you weren't thinking about it at the time data. So you can't, it's very hard to just like run a Python 2 to 3 converter over the code base and have it magically pop out at the end. It really takes a human that understands the protocol doing some of the intellectual manual labor of the conversion. So, but it's definitely a work in progress. We want it to happen. If you are interested, the audience, are interested in Twisted Python 3 support, I would definitely encourage you to get involved. We love new contributors. We're very supportive of new contributors of all sort of prior open source experience backgrounds. So please get in touch if you're interested.
Excellent, excellent. And you mentioned the conversion work that needs to go on. So I'm curious to know, is there a lot of stuff that needs to be changed? Because a lot of projects, Python projects right now, are struggling with converting to Python 3 and supporting Python 3, because there are some changes in the language and some backwards compatibility has been dropped and so on. So is there a lot of work needed to be done there, or is it a relatively simple transition?
Yeah, I think the short answer is yes, there's a lot of work. Part of, as sort of incrementally getting there, we've been trying to somewhat aggressively drop support for older Python versions. We dropped Python 2.4, we've dropped 2.5, I think on some, if not all, platforms. So we're inching our way there while still keeping in mind this sort of backwards compatibility, this stability policy that's really important to us.
And something else that I was curious about is PyPy. I don't know how much you've looked at PyPy. I'm assuming you probably have. But is there any way I could run Twisted on PyPy and maybe benefit from some of the speed benefits of PyPy?
Yeah, you totally can. And actually, if you go to speed.twistedmatrix.com, we have a bunch of performance benchmarks, and we have performance benchmarks running using CPython and also using PyPy. I don't know if like every little extension works under PyPy yet, but like in principle, yeah, if you're interested in experimenting with this, then you could totally do it. And I think people do see pretty huge performance gains for some workloads.
And I'm just conscious I should probably explain for anybody who doesn't know what PyPy is or what I'm talking about. I'll try my best to explain it. Anyway, I always get this mixed up. But Python, essentially, PyPy, is Python written in Python, and it's faster than Python. CPython, that is. Laura Creighton's told me this a couple of times at conferences, but my head kind of explodes a little bit when she tells me about it. But it is really excellent, and it's making big advances, actually, and it's making things a lot faster. I mean, she was telling me that you can get down to the same speeds as native C for some operations right now, so it'd be really cool to get some of those benefits for Twisted.
Yeah, absolutely. And the whole community, I think, is excited just to watch where PyPy is going, to see what's possible.
Excellent, excellent. So obviously, I'm curious to know a little bit more about how I would make use of Twisted. So, I mean, being a Python project, obviously you can run on pretty much any major platform. So is there any real prerequisites that I would need to have either on my system or maybe knowledge and stuff? I see that you rely on some parts of Zope, but not all of Zope. So what's the relationship with Zope, and how does that work?
Yeah, so we use Zope.interface to help us enforce. So in Python, you don't have the same strict notions of interfaces that you aren't implementing as you do in, say, a language like Java. So we use Zope.interface to give us these sort of stricter checks on you implementing an interface. So that's why we use Zope. In terms of other dependencies, for some applications, like if you're using like our SSL stuff, you need OpenSSL and other sort of obvious dependencies.
Mm-hmm. And do people, I know you've got great documentation there and support and stuff, but it is, as Randal mentioned before, it's quite a shift of approach to the traditional programming, I don't know, paradigm, for want of a better word. So do people find it easy to pick up the asynchronous kind of model and to get into it? And do you have people reporting back on how they get on with adjusting to that kind of new development model, if you like?
Yeah, that's a good question. So a task that Twisted has in some ways is teaching this new paradigm in addition to teaching Twisted for a lot of newcomers, and it's tough. It's tough to do that effectively. We certainly strive to, with our documentation, accommodate teaching this new paradigm as well. I think it is tough for some people, in particular, that you may have never seen it before in school, for example. Twisted has some really nice APIs for managing callbacks. So when you're writing event-driven programs, you handle events, you have callbacks for handling events, and you potentially have chains of callbacks for handling events. Like you may have many steps for processing an event. And this proliferation of callbacks can get out of hand quickly. And I think a lot of libraries have encountered this problem, and they've developed some sort of abstraction to deal with it. The way that Twisted has dealt with this is the notion of an object called a deferred. And a deferred is an abstraction to the idea of a result that has not completed yet, that has not arrived yet. It is also a mechanism for managing callbacks. So instead of having sort of a bunch of callbacks spread all over your code, you can register them with this one object, both callbacks for the success cases and callbacks for their error cases for these multiple steps in your processing. And then you have this one object that's really easy to inspect and really easy to pass around. So Twisted definitely sort of in general tries to make event-driven programming easier, less error prone. And then we also try to assist learners with what this whole model is about. Yeah, it's a bit of a tall order. Some people find it definitely new and a little bit challenging at first, but it's shocking how easy it is to write an IRC bot or a custom web server, all of these other things in Twisted. So it's definitely worth that little bit of initial investment.
So how did you get involved with the Twisted project? Was it as part of your actions to writing the chapter on Twisted for an open source applications volume 2 book, or were you involved with Twisted even before that?
Yeah, I've been a core maintainer for, I guess, at least over 4 years now. I'm not sure exactly how long. Twisted was actually the first project that I ever contributed to, the first open source project. And I got involved with this when I was an intern at VMware one summer while I was still in college. I was using Twisted to write this little piece of broker software. And I was confused by some of the documentation, and I hopped on the mailing list on an IRC and said, hey, I want to help with this. And I was very fortunate to have encountered, not only Glyph, the maintainer, so the originator, the creator of Twisted, but also a bunch of other really nice, helpful, smart core maintainers who supported me as I bumbled around through my first couple of patches. So I feel I'm incredibly indebted to them for being so enthusiastically supportive of me as a first-time contributor. And I've stuck with it ever since, so hopefully I was a good investment. So I've been with Twisted for a while. I wrote the chapter on Twisted for the Architecture of Open Source Applications, Volume 2. If you haven't heard of that book before, it's pretty cool. It's a bunch of, it's sort of chapters written by a bunch of really great people on a bunch of popular open source projects. You can read it online for free, and if you buy the book in any format, all of the proceeds go to Amnesty International. So it's a good investment if you're interested. And that was a lot of fun to write. And I'm writing a book on Twisted for O'Reilly now. Yes, I need more work to do, but yeah.
I'm familiar with writing books for O'Reilly. That's why I was asking about it. So yes. So how did you get involved then with Python? What brought you to Python in the first place? Was that your first scripting language?
Was Python my first scripting language? Probably in any real substantial sense, yeah. Python is pretty compelling. It's a great learning language. There's very little syntactic overhead, or there's minimal syntactic overhead. There's this quote-unquote batteries included philosophy that makes it very easy to spin up substantial applications with not a lot of work. It's very readable code. I schools are switching to Python as a teaching language. MIT, my alma mater, a couple of years ago, switched to Python for all of its intro classes. And Python is strong across a surprisingly wide range of domains. I mean, I think people wouldn't have guessed 10 years ago that Python, this interpreted language, would be so popular for scientific computing. But now it's like a huge player in that space. So Python's really versatile. It's really fast to develop in, and that was appealing to me. For my own projects, I use it in school. I use it at work. I'm pretty wedded to Python. I guess full disclosure, I'm a director for the Python Software Foundation. So I'm on the PSF board of directors. So I'm a little bit biased here, I guess. Yeah, Python's great.
How did that come about? How did you get to be on the board? What's that about?
So I'm an organizer for the Boston Python User Group, which is the largest Python user group in the world. So that is one reason. I was also on the Python Software Foundation's Outreach and Education Committee. I do a lot of community outreach. I'm very interested in lowering the barriers to entry to open source contribution and increasing sort of diversity of participants. So I do a bunch of things in that space. I'm a maintainer for a couple of projects. I do this stuff with the Boston Python User Group. So I think I draw from a lot of resources. I talk to a lot of people, and I think I add value from having all of these experiences to the board. Yeah.
So I know you kind of explained a little bit there, but can you tell us exactly what the board's role is within the Python kind of community and how they go about their business?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was sort of originally created to manage trademarks and things like that. That mission has expanded a little bit to foster some sort of membership process, so people can join the Python Software Foundation and help set the direction for Python, the language. It also has sort of the monetary resources to facilitate outreach endeavors, to do grants and scholarships and things like that. It underwrites PyCon US. So a bunch of different things, originally stemming from sort of maintaining trademarks, but expanding to sort of supporting the community around both the development of the language and the sort of the libraries and community around it.
And recently, I was sad to see that Steve Holden had to step aside as head of the Python Software Foundation. I met Steve a couple of years ago, more in fact, when I interviewed him. So obviously, we wish him all the best from everyone here at TWiT. But did that affect the foundation at all, or were you able to just kind of rally around and carry on?
Yeah, well, so Steve is still there. He's still on the board, so he's very much a presence, and his influence is still very much there. Van, the new chair, is doing a great job as well. It's very much a collaborative effort for anything like this. Whenever you have a big nonprofit, big language organization like this that's also doing things like running really big conferences, you have great people, you have great volunteers who help make things happen. So we hope to continue to do that even as Steve takes care of some of the things he needs to take care of. But Steve is great. We're greatly indebted to all that he's done for Python over the years, and he's still around. So there's no goodbyes here.
Excellent. That's great to hear. One of the other things you're involved with is Open Hatch, which sounds really fascinating. So what is Open Hatch, and what does it do?
Yeah, Open Hatch is both a nonprofit and an open source project. We have sort of a broad mission to lower the barriers to entry for open source contribution and increase contributor diversity. So we do this through a number of initiatives. We have a website that helps match new contributors with good projects that match their backgrounds. We help people learn how to use the tools of open source development through online training missions that we've developed. We have the Open Source Comes to Campus event series. So we visit college campuses for weekend workshops where we teach students the tools and community around open source development. So a bunch of really fun initiatives in this space. I'm the vice president of this organization. And if you're interested in getting, you the listeners, if you're interested in getting started with contributing to an open source project, openhatch.org would be a fine place to start. We can help you learn the tools, get the confidence, find projects. All of these things are things that we work on.
Excellent. And it's great to hear that you're getting people more involved with contributing to open source. I think a lot of people certainly when I mean, not that I've contributed that much to open source, I suppose, in the code sense, but a lot of people seem to be a little intimidated by the kind of the level, as you say, the bar that can be set really high for programming and so on. So it's really important to encourage people to give it a go. And most open source projects that I've seen seem to be very welcoming of new people, because we need more people to get involved. We can't be turning them away.
Yeah, absolutely. It's in our interest to be welcoming, right? Like, we want you to help us do all the work that we have to do.
Excellent. Yeah, of course. And obviously it's an important thing for you. So how did you get involved with that? And what was the kind of the driving force behind that? Was it just something that you saw that you wanted to help improve or change in some way?
Yeah. The answer to that question is probably a little complicated. I mean, I love hacking on code. Like, I love contributing to open source projects because it's good for me. It makes me a better software engineer. I get a lot of value out of it. And I want other people to have that experience as well. And I want to be able to hire people who have this experience, frankly. And then I also, you've probably noticed I'm a woman, and there aren't that many of us in the open source community, and I would like to see more of us. And not just women, but people of all computing backgrounds. All non-computing backgrounds. Open source is a place where not only code, but documentation and UI and architecture, it brings together a lot of different disciplines, and people should know that, they might have a passion that fits in very well with open source. So spreading that mission. Yeah, I'm very interested in encouraging people to give it a shot.
And I wanted to actually go to that direction for a moment, if you don't mind. We've had Randy Harper's a co-host here, and we've had Liz Quilty on as well, talking about, and a few other of our guests are women in open source. And I'm wondering, what's your take on that? How do we get women to be more represented in open source? What are we doing wrong? What can we fix?
Sure. I mean, so first, I would say that no person is necessarily doing, or no entity is doing things wrong. It's this is the culmination of a lot of history, and it takes time in some ways just to learn how to be better about being welcoming to people of all backgrounds, not just women. And it's a long pipeline that has leaks at every step. So this potentially starts in childhood with the question of why more girls don't get into computing, and then it works its way up from there. In general, I'll say a couple of things. One is, my experience in open source communities has been awesome. I have gotten a ton of value out of it. People are very supportive. People are in general very nice, and they want you to be successful, and they want their projects to be successful. So most people are great, and they want to see their communities grow. When you're trying to make this sort of broad, this is a long change that requires sometimes proactive outreach, sort of explicitly encouraging women or other underrepresented groups, saying you in particular, you are absolutely welcome, and we would like to support you here, perhaps more than you would normally do. It requires being generally welcoming to beginners. If you're an open source project and you don't have a great story when someone comes to you and says, I'm new to this and I don't really know what to do, but can I help? You should get a good story for that. Send them to OpenHatch. We're happy to train them up and help you with that. So having a good story for beginners, for being welcoming in general, for being a supportive as opposed to flamey and overly critical. Let's all work together on software as collaborative adults know how to be. And I think good things will happen. I mean, I think the community is changing, and the change that we want to see is starting to happen. It's necessarily a long process, but there are a lot of good people doing good work. Most people have good intentions, and I feel very good about where open source is going. That was sort of a rambly answer. Hopefully that was helpful. That
was good, though. Actually, I'm actually curious, is what was different for you that you're now in a key position in open source? What made the difference for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of it was having peers who were not afraid to get involved as well. A lot of my peers were men, but that's okay. They still were people that I could look to for help and who could support me if I was unsure about my abilities. So having a good support infrastructure and also just being passionate about coding in a way that makes you not get sidetracked by the fact that you may be the only woman in the room. I don't know why I am that way and some other people aren't that way. And not everybody has to be like me. I'd like it if we somehow develop a culture that encourages, sort of lots of perspectives to be interested as well. Yeah, I don't know why exactly I'm different or sometimes different. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting. Dan's whispering in my ear that there's a lot of prominent women in the Python community. Do you think Python in general is different, a different attitude towards women, or is that an anomaly?
Python has worked very hard. Like, we've invested a lot of time and energy into being a welcoming environment for everyone. This is everything from the tone that we set on our mailing lists to having a core mentorship program where beginners can get help from core developers as beginners, to having sort of a very pro-diversity and pro-outreach stance at our conferences, to having codes of conduct, to calling out bullshit and bad behavior, to generally being happy, supportive people and letting that show through and people liking that. Other communities do this too. I know the most about Python, but I would say that when you put sort of reasonable, supportive people together with a mission, the right things tend to fall out. So this is the work. This is good stewardship by Guido and the PSF and good people working on good problems, and this is sort of what's just happened.
Well, good. I hope you'll let that be a good model then for other communities to adopt. It sounds like you've certainly found sort of the right match, the right niche in there. I want to go back to asking a few technical questions again. I don't know much about Python. I have to actually say I'm not a Python expert in any way, shape, or form, although I've sat in a couple of Guido's classes, so at least I've taken Python right from the source. So in terms of setting up Twisted and making it work for me, I know there's a bunch of protocols already established, but would it be hard? Are the building blocks there for me to create like a new protocol? If I decide, say, that Jabber wasn't supported, I could add Jabber pretty easily and drop it in?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, Twisted is great for that because it provides this nice API, the nice primitives on top of your operating system, what your operating system exposes. So yeah, it makes it really easy to do that in a cross-platform way and in a like a scalable, efficient way, because doing event-driven programming right the first time you won't necessarily get right, but Twisted has invested that work for you. So yes, you can write new protocols, you can extend existing protocols, you can sort of mash multiple networking protocols together in your application. Twisted makes all of this very easy.
Is there a protocol already built in for, say, live PCAP, so I could do, say, data or sniffing on the wire and do something against that?
Not built into the core library, although I would not be surprised if there's a library built on top of Twisted that does that. So one of Twisted's goals from the get-go was sort of being extensible, making it very easy to build libraries on top of Twisted. And so there's been a huge proliferation of libraries on top of Twisted. This happens in particular as sort of networking protocols evolve. Twisted is a little bit conservative about what it wants to include in the core library. So for example, WebSockets. So WebSockets were an IETF draft for a long time. They actually just recently became a standard. People got really interested in having WebSocket support in Twisted as soon as the browser started adopting it. We weren't quite ready to do that since it was still sort of a changing draft, but people immediately sort of went off and built libraries on top of Twisted for that protocol. So yeah, Twisted makes that very easy. Twisted could do that for you, I think, pretty easily. Yeah.
And I've heard that Twisted has a somewhat infamous development process. I don't know if you've covered this already, but can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Yeah, so infamous, what we have is pretty strict coding, documentation, and testing standards. And I'll elaborate on that in a second. But the reason we have these is because we're a pretty large project that has a pretty big support matrix. We have to support a bunch of different Pythons on a bunch of different operating systems across a bunch of protocols. And we have this really strict backwards compatibility policy and deprecation policy. So when you put all of these things together, it necessitates good code, sort of code quality control.
Sure.
So the deal is when you want to fix something in Twisted, you want to add something to Twisted, that change needs to be accompanied by unit tests and documentation. And then everything gets reviewed, even work by core maintainers before it gets merged. So Infamous, I don't know, rigorous, definitely. It's great for instilling good software engineering practices I think in our developers. I've had value out of this, but that's the deal. So there's a little bit of additional upfront work maybe in that you do have to write tests and documentation, but the payoff is that we have constantly increasing code coverage for both tests and documentation, which is pretty great. And we have a track record of pretty excellent, an excellent lack of regressions in Twisted.
That is one of the things I've noticed that's difficult is testing event-driven programming, because you have to simulate all the jiggering that might go on, the randomness of this event happening before that or after that. How do you simulate that? Do you have random number generators in your test suite, or is it rigorously doing every possible sort of ordering and stuff?
Yeah, so Twisted actually comes with Trial, which is a testing. It's called Trial. It's a testing framework for testing Twisted applications. So Trial makes it easy to, because you have these deferreds. You have this execution that may or may not have finished that you have to keep track of. Trial makes it easy to just do that as part of tests. So it looks very similar to Python's unit testing framework, but has sort of the necessary bells and whistles to make it easy to test event-driven programs and easy to mock. The Twisted was developed to make it very easy to mock out parts of your applications for testing. In particular, there's a very clear separation between transports and protocols that makes it very easy to mock your transports for testing. So if you need to pretend you got whatever form of data, that's very easy to do in your tests using this Trial framework within Twisted.
And how is this performant enough? Is the performance good enough that I can write, say, high-scale web server with this, or is this still somewhat more just wanting to react to slower protocols?
Yeah, I think Twisted is definitely competitive. I don't want to sort of try to quote any specific benchmarks since I don't know them offhand, although you can all go to speed.twistedmatrix.com and check out sort of the current state of affairs and sort of historical data on our performance. Yeah, I think I say, it's competitive, and if it wasn't, people wouldn't still be using it after 10 years. I don't know if I have any specific numbers to quote for you, but people absolutely, people use this in production to deal with sort of high volume applications for sure.
Okay, and so who decides what's in the next release of Twisted? How does the governance for this work? Consensus by the people who do the work to. So if you want something in Twisted, you need to, get the ticket going and do the coding and documentation and testing work to get it merged. There are core contributors who might care about adding like an entire new protocol, like support for an entire new protocol. But it's whoever makes the work get done, they get what they want in Twisted. Everything is reviewed. We have high standards. But yeah, there's no like emperor of Twisted. No Grand Poobah or anything like that.
Yeah.
And Glyph stepped down doing that. Why did he leave, or is he still around?
Oh, Glyph is absolutely around. If you want it for a fun time, you can go to twistedmatrix.com/high scores, which is our monthly high scores list for contributors, which I'm sure you'll see Glyph on. We have a number of sort of very prolific Twisted contributors. As well as a lot of people who use Twisted at work and so contribute sort of in that capacity. No, Glyph is very much around. Yeah.
And so how many, you mentioned other core contributors, so how many people really are sort of at the core of this?
So people who've been sort of like long-term core maintainers, depending on how you define this, certainly between half a dozen and a dozen people, I would say. And we have sort of a lot of people contribute every month. Several dozen people contribute to Twisted in some capacity every month.
Okay, and this obviously is not your full-time job. What else do you do you work for Google, right? So what else do you do?
So I don't work for Google. I did work for, although I find Google, no, I did work for Oracle. until recently. I'm working at a new startup now, but what we're doing is a secret. So
yeah, and so how much of your time do you get to spend working on Twisted versus doing your day job?
That fluctuates, but I try to review a couple of tickets every week, and then so in particular, my time right now, a lot of the time that I would spend writing code for Twisted is being spent writing this book. I was a mentor for some of our summer interns as well, so it fluctuates over time, a couple of hours a week, possibly many hours a week if I have something I really want to get done.
How did you get involved with writing a book? I know my personal story for that, but let's hear yours.
So with the O'Reilly book, I'm writing a sort of an updated version of Twisted Network Essentials. And that book is just pretty old. It came out, I think, 2005. And so the reality is that a lot of the APIs have just changed since then. And a lot of people, we sort of routinely get lots of requests for an updated version of this book. And I wanted the opportunity to experience writing a full book, so I sort of jumped at that, and sort of Glyph and the other core maintainers said, yes, please, we would love to see this book updated. So they're on board as well. And then for AOSA, for the architecture of open source applications, I guess I evangelize Twisted and I evangelize Python a fair amount, so I think I'm an easy target when people are looking for chapter writers.
Yes, you do realize, of course, that you're not going to get rich writing these books, right?
Oh no, this is for the experience, for sure.
I mean, I tell people it's a labor of love because it's really minimum wage. It's about all we ever get from these things, and that's a successful book when you actually even get back more than your original advance. So good luck on that.
I appreciate that.
Really cool. But it's a great experience though to be able to. I remember when my first retail book, the Programming Perl book came out, walking into a bookstore and touching it on the shelf, and it's just an awesome experience, just another thing. So anyway, I think Dan has one more question to ask you. Dan, want to take it?
Yeah, I was curious to know about some of the new features that you've got in Twisted, because you mentioned in the little write-up that you sent us that people who haven't used Twisted in a few years may have missed out on some of the new stuff that's come along. So get us excited. What's new in Twisted that we should be getting fired up about?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you've truly not used Twisted in several years, you may be delighted about, IPv6 support. We sort of refactored our SSL supports. We have an entirely new, better, more extensible API for sort of general client-server connections. It's called endpoints, which is just a much nicer high-level interface towards making these connections. There's a new templating system in Twisted Web. In general, sort of, the internet is always evolving, so there's sort of always work for Twisted to do. We're always supporting new platforms. Ubuntu comes out with a new release, we need to make sure we support it. OS X comes out with a new release, we need to make sure we support it. New Pythons come out. Python 3 support is in the works. We're always striving for bug-free, RFC-compliant software, which is seemingly endless task. So, the code quality continues to go up. Our documentation continues to get better. Our APIs continue to get better. So if you haven't used Twisted in a couple of years, I would definitely encourage you to check it out and see what's new.
Great. We've chatted for a bit. We're almost out of time. I just wanted to ask, is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to make sure that our audience is aware of about Twisted?
That you are aware of. Well, no, I have a call to action, though. I mean, if you like networking, you should check out Twisted. If you are curious about contributing to an open source project and you're not sure where to start, Twisted is a great first place. We're very encouraging of new contributors. We have a nice review process that I think will instill good habits in you. It was my first project. I would encourage you all to consider making it your first project as well. We've been around for a while. We'll continue to be around. Adoption has been great, and we look forward to the next 10 years of Twisted.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, I have the two obligatory questions I have to ask every guest. I think I know the answer to this one, though. Let's just see. Favorite scripting language?
I'm going to have to go with Python here, I think. But also, that it really is. The PSF could be a big front, but the reality is when I have to get work done at home, at work, I use Python.
Okay, I'll have to. Yeah, I think I know the answer to that, but maybe you'll win on this one. Let's see. Emacs, VI, or some other text editor?
Emacs. I went to MIT, which has a long tradition with not only Emacs, but Lisp. So I learned it there, and it's a habit that's definitely stuck around.
Thanks for letting me score one on my side for that particular equation. That's very good. Well, Jessica, it's been wonderful having you on the show today and talking about Twisted, and let's talk about Python in general, and even a little bit of insight into women in open source. I really appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you very much for having me. Very cool. That was Jessica McKellar. She's one of the Twisted core maintainers and a published author as well, which is also very good. Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a fascinating discussion. I'm wondering how you got on with so much love for Python there. I know that's not always your favorite subject. But no, I thought it was fantastic. And yeah, Jessica's really interesting. And I think while I haven't done that much with Twisted, I don't do a lot of asynchronous programming stuff. I tend to stick to like Django and so on. Everybody I know who's into asynchronous programming raves to me about how amazing Twisted is. I know some friends who've worked on big projects with Twisted, and it really seems to be the place to be if you're doing Python stuff and you want to do any kind of networking, asynchronous programming stuff. It seems to be the gold standard right now. Indeed. And I've done a bunch of event-driven programming with Perl, and there's a lot of frameworks for that out there. Poe, I think, comes to mind, and a few others. So this is great that Python has this sort of library, and it sounds like it's really well supported, really well modified, maintained, and stuff. So I'm very happy to have brought Jessica on to talk about that. We originally had talked to Glyph himself about coming on the show, and I'm sort of happy we got Jessica on instead, because she's very vocal about Twisted and doing a very good job with it, and really happy to also, like I said, dip a little bit into the women in open source issue that I'm always trying to figure out better ways to get that better balanced, better represented, and so on. And yeah, it's a Python show. I can't tell you how many times I bit my tongue during this show. It was like, yeah, but Perl has this and Perl has that and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I'm fine with it. Look, I've always been of the position that you don't have to be religious about programming languages. You can be, but you don't have to be. And I use Perl because it's more familiar to me, and because it's out there and does the things I want it to do. So it's really fine with me if other people decide to use Python or Ruby or whatever happens to suit their situation. What I'm confused by, Dan, and do you know any more about this? Why is Python written in Python faster than Python written in C? I don't understand this at all. Do you have an explanation for that? I can't really explain it. I've had it explained to me about 2 or 3 times, and it's kind of like it's an obvious joke, but it's the snake eating its own tail. It seems a bit strange. But it is faster, and it's up to 3 to 4 times faster than normal Python. Well, maybe we should get Laura Creighton on to talk about that, because she does PyPy, okay, which is really taking off now. And one of the questions, last year I was on a panel at PyCon UK with Laura and Alison Randal and some other people. And one of the questions was, why is Python so slow? And Laura's answer was, it's not anymore, because we've got PyPy. So yeah, we'll have to get her on to talk about that. Semantically, that doesn't even make sense. If you're doing the same things that Python written in C does, if you're covering the entire same space, there's from information theory, that has to be faster than Python one level removed. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, mind blown. Mind blown. But maybe she can explain it to us. I don't get it. We are definitely going to have Laura on, because I do not understand this at all. It doesn't make any sense to me. Maybe it's just that it's early in the morning and I don't get it. Anyway, great. So this is a great show. I really enjoyed having Jessica on. Speaking of great shows, we have a bunch of great shows coming up. Next week, show is being moved to Thursday at 8:30, not Wednesday. So if you tune in the live stream on Wednesday, you won't see us, because there's this little company, I think they're called something like Snapple, and they're having some sort of new device that fits in your pocket. I think you make calls with and stuff. But anyway, they're announcing it next Wednesday, and so we're getting moved to Thursday instead of Wednesday. We're going to have the Open ROV people in. That's just underwater robots. Oh, so cool! Robots and water. Nothing but like both of those at the same time. And we're going to be in studio with those. I think they're bringing in a big aquarium or something to show this thing off in. And we've got our good friend Aaron is coming in the studio as well to talk about that. Should be fun next week, but next Thursday, not next Wednesday. So we're going to be one day late on the live streams and one day late getting us out to you on the feeds.
Following that, we got Jaspersoft coming in, business intelligence software. The KVM people from Red Hat are coming in to talk about this virtualization layer that's being used by pretty much everybody that's cloud these days. HPCC, high-performance computing systems, coming in to talk about how they make teraflops and gigaflops and quasi-flops, wherever those things are going. And then also on the schedule still, the Air chatbot, which is a Jabber bot that can talk to you and give you information about that. Still launching a bunch of email to fill in the rest of Q4, so you'll hear more announcements as we go along. If you follow us on Floss Weekly on Google+, you'll hear as the announcements come out, because then we'll talk about all the new shows that are coming in. I also post occasionally to Floss Weekly on Identica and Twitter, so you can also follow us there. We do have a chat room that goes live. We're at 8:30 a.m. Pacific time, usually Wednesdays, Thursday next week only, back to Wednesdays after that. So you can actually ask questions of our guests and of us while we're busy taping the show. You can follow me, Merlin, M-E-R-L-Y-N. I'm Merlin on Twitter. I'm also Randal L. Schwartz on Google+. I post 3 or 4 interesting things a week there, or a day there. I'll be in New Orleans from September 28th to October 5th. I'm on as far as the IRS is concerned, a planning retreat in New Orleans. So if you're in the New Orleans area, please let me know, and I will meet up with you. That'll be fun. Dan, that's everything you want to plug. What about you?
Yeah, I've got a list of things, actually, so I won't bore you for too long. But tonight we've got, well, it's a bit late now, but on the night we're actually recording this, it's a Liverpool Linux user group meeting, which I regularly attend, first Wednesday of every month. So if you're near the northwest of England and you're a Linux user, you want to come along and talk about Linux, then have a look at livelug.org.uk is the place to go. Tomorrow night, that's Thursday, September the 6th, we've got Social Media Cafe Liverpool, which I'm involved in organising. We've got lots of interesting speakers coming along for that. That's free to come along to. It's at the Static Gallery, 6:30 p.m. onwards. If you search for Social Media Cafe Liverpool, you can find that. On Friday night, that's the 7th, I'm going to be playing a gig at a place called Woodward's Wine Bar in Formby, which is just up the road, with my band. So if anybody wants to come along, have a look at 20pound.net to find out more about that. A couple of interesting events coming up. We've got Saturday, September 22nd and 23rd, we've got the NHS Hack Day in Liverpool, which is, well, the tagline is for geeks who love the NHS, which is the National Health Service over here. So we're getting clinicians and doctors and so on together with geeks to try and solve problems through software and hacking and stuff. So that should be really cool. If you look for NHShackday.com, then you can find out more there. And on the 29th, Saturday the 29th of September, I'll be at Barcamp Blackpool, which is just kind of an hour up the road in Blackpool. So if you want to come along, I'm playing with the band, but I'll be hanging around and talking to people. So you can find me there. And in the meantime, head to danlynch.org, where you can find links to Twitter and all those kind of things, and Google Plus and Facebook and my blog and other boring stuff that you probably don't want to read. But head over there to find out more about that at danlynch.org.
Well, Dan, I really appreciate you stepping up twice in 2 weeks back to the co-host position here, because it turned out to be the best for all of us. You obviously knew a lot more about Python than I did, so thank you for coming along. Really appreciate that.
No problem. Thank you very much. And I'm pleased that I know more about something than you do, Randall. There can't be many things that I know more about than you.
You clearly know more about the Linux desktop than I do, too, so I will definitely grant you that one as well.
Maybe. Always a pleasure. I'll see you next time.
Very good, very good. And I'm signing off here from my closest thing I have to a home here in Beaverton, Oregon. Beautiful Beaverton, Oregon, with a giant big blue Yeti mic, and having a good time. And we'll see you all again next week, next Thursday, if it's live. We'll see you all again next week on Floss Weekly.